Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bennington Select Board. It is Monday, February 9th, 2015. We are at the River Street Firehouse. We meet here on the second and fourth Monday of every month at 6 p.m. unless otherwise noted. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the board. Tom Jacobs to my far left, Michael Keene.
Good evening.
Sharon Brush, our vice chair. I'm Greg Van Houten, chair. James Carroll, Justin Corcoran, and John McFadden. Our town manager, Stu Hurd, and Linda Bermudez is recording. First article on the agenda is the minutes from January 26th. Do I have a motion to accept those?
I'll move they be accepted as printed.
Give a second. Anyone? Wait a second.
Nobody's
I'll
going
have a second. You happy now?
Yeah, you were there, right?
Yeah.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? That is, Justin, you were not, were you there?
Abstention, I was not
One
here.
abstention, yeah, two absent. So that's 5 and 2 absent. All right. Next item is the warrants. Tom, you have any questions on the warrants? Great. Michael?
I had a question which Stu answered earlier
That's
today.
that? Okay. Sharon?
No, I have nothing.
James?
No.
Justin?
I do not.
John?
I'm all set.
Stu, do you want to make any statements on salt expenses or anything like that?
Well, I was going to talk about that in my
Manager's
manager's
report?
report.
That's fine.
Salt, we've used about 2/3 of our allocated or budgeted amount. We are currently out of salt, as are many communities in the Northeast. We did manage to work with the state of Vermont to purchase 100 tons, so we'll be back in business tomorrow morning. And we've got orders, but orders are being delayed or slowed because of the high demand. So we're not unlike anyone else, but please exercise care. We don't have as much salt to put down on the roads as we have in the past.
All right, thanks. All right, next item is citizens. Do we have any citizens who'd like to ask a question of the board, town manager, or Mr. Grimshaw? Go ahead. Please go to the mic and identify yourself. Either one of the mics is fine.
Good evening to the board and everyone in the audience and citizens in TV land at large. My name is Jeff Grimshaw. I'm a resident of Bennington, have been for about 20 months. And I'm a media consultant here in town. I call myself a friend of Bennington, and that is because Bennington in the past 20 months has been so friendly to me and my family. Every once in a while I buttonhole a member of the select board, and I start talking to them about issues and good news and everything, and I like to report a lot of good news. And one of the members said, why don't you come and address, there seems to be a lot of good news lately. So I just wanted to get that out to everyone. Sometimes we fail, we focus on bad news, and I'd like to take a couple of minutes, and I hope to make this a regular thing, to focus on some of the really, really good news that's happened to Bennington, has put us in the national spotlight, both in traditional media and in social media. And I call this Big on Bennington, because I am really, 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 based on what's going on, if we go back, a year ago or last March, we call that kind of hitting rock bottom. Everything since then, we've had really a flurry of good news. And I just kind of want to point some of that stuff out. Recently, the Bennington Museum was cited by the Wall Street Journal as one of the best museums in America. I think that's huge for us. The Blue Bend Diner was cited on Yahoo.com as being one of the top 21 diners in America. As a matter of fact, it occupied the #1 position. BuzzFeed has just come out with the top 20 coffee houses in America, and the South Street Cafe figures prominently on that list. Farmers Market, of which I'm a member of the board, we're projecting about 35,000 foot traffic this year, and that will put us above the Bennington Battle Monument as the #1 foot traffic generator here in town. That was cited by one of the top foodie sites on the internet, the Daily Meal, as being the number 72 best farmers market in America. And we're competing with other markets in Vermont, Seattle, down in Connecticut, in Pennsylvania, in Atlanta. We were all over. This is a big feather in our cap. The Sonata Music group, they wanted me to tell you that they've been featured on CNN and the New York Times.
Sonatina you're talking about.
I'm sorry?
Sonatina?
Yes,
Sonatina,
I apologize.
thanks.
Yes. And even 4 years ago, and I don't know how much play this got, Garlic Fest in Reuters was cited as the 8th best Garlic Fest on planet Earth. So Bennington has got so much going for it, and I think we hit the pinnacle this January with the Yankee Magazine article, and I don't know if people have talked about it or have seen it. I just want to read you a couple of excerpts. They talk about Bennington's rich history, and here's a quote: "Sink a shovel into the earth in Bennington, and you will find a chunk of history. Artists have overrun the landscape in Bennington. Bennington is a jumble of artsy shops and cafes with a jittery beat spiced up with some highly regarded nearby museums. If you're creative, Bennington is the place to be." They talk about Fiddlehead, the Bullseye Center of Bennington, an insanely attractive fine arts gallery. So, it's easy to lose ourselves in bad news if we believed everything that's said about us on the bad news side, like Fox News. Some people, some kids, some instructors in this town decided to do something about it and took Fox News to task. And in my humble opinion, there was a Battle of Bennington 2.0 waged, and once again, Bennington repelled the invaders and made them look nothing short of ridiculous. So I just want to say that I love being here. I think this is a great town. I've just cited numerous reasons why this is a great town. There's a lot of media being written about us. I would hope that Bennington would take the bull by the horn. As I understand it, there is no function for social media and internet media management and reputation. And we saw a year ago how damaging that can be, and we've seen kind of on an ad hoc basis how wonderful it can be. Hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, Bennington will have a function like that, because social media, there's nothing more powerful. We proved that in the last month. So thank you very much.
Jeff?
Jeff?
I want to thank you for your comments, because I think they're very timely and appropriate, even in this beautiful weather that we've been having for the last couple of weeks. I think you come across as sort of like the town crier. So if you'd like that position, I'd love to hear you.
I will accept it gladly.
And come and share the good news, because it's nice to get, we get roses and thorns, and I think we even need more than that, and our comments were well placed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jeff, I want to thank you for the work you've done with the Quantum League kids, and I want to congratulate them. That's twice that they've gone to bat for Bennington, and I think they've done a fine job. It takes a lot of courage, and I think they did a good point-by-point response on both cases. On the note of the arts, we're going to be talking a little later. There's a National Center for the Arts Research from Southern Methodist University did a 29-page study on arts vibrancy, and they've had a list of the top 20 most vibrant arts communities in the country, above and under 1 million population. Bennington came in number 15. It's a pretty impressive study. They go into a lot of detail how they got it, but speaking of what we're going to be talking about this a little later, and it's definitely a stronghold of Bennington, and I appreciate you bringing it to light.
Well, we have a pretty strong town, very strong people, and good leadership, of course.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move right on to number 5. It's a public hearing for a VCDP implementation grant from Shires Housing. This is a rehab grant. Mr. Broderick from Shires Housing is going to bring us through that and then entertain any
Hi,
questions.
everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come tonight. My name is John Broderick. I'm Executive Director of Shires Housing, as you know. We are requesting funding for a development, 26 units of rehabilitation, of housing that we already own in town, all in historic buildings. We're calling it Bennington Historic Rehabilitation Project, and I'd like to walk you through some of the key points. 26 apartments in 6 buildings, all of which Shires already owns and manages. All of the buildings were built before 1900. We're planning energy upgrades, new boiler systems, new windows, insulation, air sealing. We're planning in most of the apartments new kitchens and bathrooms and other fixtures like flooring, doors, exterior paint and trim, repairs of steps and walkways. Again, what we do is perpetually affordable housing, so when we do these developments, whether they're new or whether they're rehab, we sign covenants that we will maintain those properties perpetually as affordable to people in targeted income ranges. So we sign up for a long commitment. Perpetuity is a long time. And when we take funds to do these sorts of things, we're promising to serve people in a particular narrow band of income ranges that are known to be vulnerable in the private rental market. So all the units are 23 out of the 26 are income restricted for people that make 50, 60% of the median income. And so 16 of the 20 units are designated for people who make less than 50% of the median income. Adjusted for family size, this is the mid $20,000 range, 24, 25, 26. 7 of the units are designated for people at 60% of median, a little bit higher. Again, the reason why this is different is because of our funding sources. We have to put together a complicated matrix of the 4 main funders that we have, each of which has different requirements. 3 of the units are unrestricted, meaning they can be rented to anyone. Those 3 are more or less designated because we know that there are already people there who are above that income range, and we want to make sure that people are able to come back after the renovation. 3 of the 26 units are fully ADA compliant, meaning fully accessible. All of the units are visitable, which means they have wide enough doorways for wheelchairs to go through, and most are adaptable, meaning the units are built so that they can be easily adapted for mobility impairments. The 3 ADA compliant units, I'll just say right up front, is more than is required. Our understanding of ADA is that in a 26 unit development, it's 1 accessible unit per 20 units. So we could get away with 1 or 2. We're doing an extra 1. We're doing 1 at each of the 3 sites, which I'll explain. Existing, all the units are currently occupied, or there might be 1 or 2 vacancies currently, but everyone who lives there now will be able to come back if they choose to that apartment, and all of their relocation expenses will be covered during that time. That goes for moving, storage, utility, connections and disconnections, even cable TV hookups if they need to be moved temporarily. Total project cost, $4.5 million. The sources that we already have committed are Vermont Housing Conservation Board. Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston has a program called their Affordable Housing Program. People's Bank is the member, and they were our sponsor. That's a $500,000 commitment, combination of loan and grant. Home Funds, Federal Home Program, that we're requesting $400,000. That's on the schedule for March to be decided. That's also Vermont Housing Conservation Board that makes that decision. Low-income housing tax credits, we're applying for a slightly less valuable version of the tax credits. These are 4% tax credits as opposed to 9% tax credits. They generate a lot less yield, and they're a little bit less competitive. Those are allocated by Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Community Development Block Grant Funds, that's why we're here, requesting $510,000, of which $500,000 will go into the construction cost, and $10,000 will be to cover the town's administration of the grant. Also, state tax credits, and then historic rehabilitation tax credits, because, again, the properties are all historic and have historic value, and we will get some credit for maintaining that, the historic nature of the properties. As you know, the work that we do is consistent with terms of the town plan and the regional plan. You passed it, you voted on it, so you know it. We've been through the sections before of the town plan where our developments are relevant. A couple of those points are there. So about the specific properties, a location map. First properties are Carrigan Lane. We consider this one development now because it's owned by one partnership. There are 17 units here, which include 50 and 100 Carrigan Lane, which is between Division and Safford, and then 316 and 318 Safford Street. When Shires took this collection of buildings over, apparently they were in really bad shape. I wasn't around at that time, but the work that was done initially when Shires got a hold of them was to bring them back online after years of deterioration. We're planning energy retrofits, and I think that's really the biggest thing. I think what a lot of private property owners out there find is that these buildings are old and they weren't insulated very well, and that's why there's exceptionally high operating costs that we're trying to address. These are pictures of 100 Carrigan Lane. This is sort of tucked in a little lane. I'm not sure if you know where it is, but it's between Division and Safford. It's a really cute little neighborhood. Even though they are showing their age, I think we do a pretty good job of keeping them looking good on the outside and keeping them safe and appropriate looking on the inside. This is 50 Carrigan Lane. 316 and 318 Safford Street. Here in the bottom right is the one you see from, the two bottom ones are the ones you see from the road, from Safford Street. More on Safford Street there. 119 Pleasant Street. This is sort of right behind the municipal parking lot, just off Main Street, sort of behind the Unitarian Church. There are 4 apartments here. It's right off the municipal parking lot, so it's a highly visible building. A lot of people have commented on how our rehabs came out on Benmont Avenue, how they really stand out. We're hoping to do the same thing here, right close to the Central Business District, very visible location. And then finally, 233 School Street. I think I got my map wrong there for location, but this is on School Street, directly next to the entrance to Bennington Elementary, directly across from the Bennington Sports Center entrance in the former Catamount building. This has 5 apartments, mostly elderly folks, and I think they tried to do a condominium conversion years ago, and it fell apart, ended up in distress. We took it over, and have been managing it fairly successfully since then. Those are the highlights of the development. You have a pre-application that we have submitted to the Vermont Community Development Program. I'm happy to take questions about anything that's on that application or not. And anything I can't answer on the spot, I'm willing to certainly get back right away about.
Michael, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you, John. Bear with me. A citizen, Charlie Murphy, sent an email to the members of the Select Board asking 2 questions. I think you've partially addressed them. I'd like to ask them again, and maybe you could readdress them. First question he asked, and then I have a couple of questions of my own. First question that he asked is, how many of the 26 apartments are currently accessible?
There are 3.
There are 3 that are currently accessible by the legal definition of
That's right.
accessible. And I understand that you were going to have 3 apartments of the 26 accessible at the end of this project with the money from the grant. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's that.
Can I
Second-
embellish though, Michael? Can I add to that? Is
Yeah,
that all
go
right?
ahead.
So fully ADA compliant, accessible apartments with full-blown ramps, like really suitable for
Yep.
a household member with a wheelchair.
Yep.
We're required to have one, possibly two in this development. We're doing three.
Yeah, I know.
And we're renovating them, we're keeping them up. And as I've explained to Charlie through an email today, we look for ways to make our units more accessible all the time. Visitability is a really important clause now. So even if an apartment is not fully 100% accessible, it's made so that, frail, elderly residents can visit, and where the doors are wide enough for wheelchairs. Bathrooms are generally acceptable. And then for adaptability, we're building everything that's adaptable. And every new bathroom that's being built is built so that it can handle grab bars eventually.
Thanks. You talk about time sensitivity of the required bond closing. What is that? What is that in months or weeks from now?
Closing and breaking ground at the end of this year.
Okay.
And it may seem like a long time, but there are a lot of steps that need to take place. We have a couple of more funding commitments that we need to nail down. Once all the funding commitments are in place, we've got some steps before we can get to a construction loan closing. We've got some steps before we can break ground. So,
Where will the current tenants be accommodated during the course of the build or the renovation?
we're planning on phasing the construction. We're still talking about how we would do that. So we hope to be able to accommodate some of the residents in other units that we own, and then others would be in private market rentals that are out there for rent.
Okay. And lastly, question 13 of the application refers to questions 11 or 12 and asks for an explanation in detail if a yes was answered either to question 11 or 12. You answered yes to the question number 11. Has any portion of the project budget been obligated to date? But there is no explanation for in 13.
I'm sorry, that's a mistake. The parts of the development budget that have been allocated to date, which means that have been spent, would be pre-development costs. Costs for the architect, costs for a consultant, costs for engineering, costs for permit applications, things like that.
That's all I have.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
I just see a project at $4.5 million for 26 units. That's like $176,000 per unit. How can you respond to a concern that this board member and citizens would have that, you can go out and build a house for $176,000? Why are we putting good money into structures that may have historic benefit relevance, but really are not of significant value?
Tom, policy decisions have been made at the federal and state levels many times over the past 40 years that we can't turn our backs on our existing housing stock. They're there. Their buildings, the properties are there. And a lot of times they fall into distress. A lot of things have changed about the market. We know that. And when properties fall into distress, we need to reinvest in those properties. It may seem like it would make more sense to just forget about them and build new. That's not always the answer. Sometimes new construction makes sense. Sometimes rehab makes sense. But as for the cost, it seems like a lot, but a lot of it is energy-related improvements. A lot of the buildings were really underwater and in distress. When I say distress, I don't just mean physical deterioration. I mean financial distress. I mean that the numbers really just don't work without an investment of government resources. That's why there are government programs like this. That's why HOME was created. That's why the low-income housing tax program, low-income housing tax credit program was created. We are making use of those resources here in Bennington, just the way organizations like ours are doing around the state of Vermont and around the whole country.
Anyone else?
I do.
Go ahead, Jim.
Again, I want to return to Tom's point about $176,000 per unit. Can you explain to me, are there federal or state requirements that, let's say, well, I don't know, that require this amount of money being spent on, and how many square feet are we talking about per unit at $176,000?
Jim, I'll say that, yes, it's expensive, but to go out and build a house for $176,000, I mean, we've hired a company, Naylor and Breen. They actually were the construction, they were the builders for our North Branch Street development. And we've hired them as construction managers here so that they can do the bidding. So this is based on a cost estimate that real construction people did.
Okay.
We're not asking for donations.
All right, my question that I need clarified is this $176,000 per apartment or the building itself, total?
It's $176,000 per unit with everything wrapped up in.
What defines a unit? Is it
An
a house
apartment.
or an apartment?
An apartment.
That's ridiculous.
It's consistent with the way that rehabs are being done around the state and around the country. The cost estimates were done by a real construction company who called Bennington contractors to get the pricing for
Okay,
it.
so what on average, what's the square footage for each one of these units? Do
Well,
you have an idea?
they're all different, but, one bedrooms are 800 to 900 square feet, two bedrooms are 900 to
Does this
1,050.
constitute, totally gutting the place?
The scope of work is different for each of the buildings, but in some places it removes walls and adds insulation from the inside. In some locations it means taking off siding on the outside and doing insulation. It's boilers, it's windows, it's doors, it's kitchens, it's bathrooms. Substantial rehabilitation is what we call it.
To go back to Jim's question, I think, there are codes that you have to meet, I think was
Yeah, I
his
think
original
that's
question.
more the question
there's-
that I wanted answered.
It has to,
Yeah.
it has to meet a standard that I would not necessarily have to meet if I were renovating my own home.
It has to meet not just code standards, but it needs to meet a new energy standard that's been passed by the state of Vermont that's putting a lot of pressure on developers to make sure that when we're building these things, we're doing them right, that we're building them to last. It's affordable, but it's not cheap. It's income restricted, and when we sign those covenants, we're signing up for 20 years of inspections. So we have a lot of those funders who give us funds, but then they come around every year and they say, we want to see 3 apartments randomly.
I think
I have
that
another
speaks to what you...
question. Well, these are currently properties that are owned by Shires.
That's right.
Okay. When was the last time they were rehabbed?
12 to 15 years ago.
12?
And, I think that part of the reason why the scope is deeper now than it was at the time is because the funders are seeing the nonprofit developers coming back after 15, 16, 17 years. And we're hoping to, by doing more, by going deeper, especially on the energy side, we're really prolonging the life so that we won't have to do that in such a short time span again.
All right, so I don't know whether you can recall these figures, but 12 to 15 years ago, do you remember what they spent on rehabbing this?
No, I wasn't around for it, and the dollars were, different. The dollars wouldn't make as much sense in today's dollars,
yeah.
but the scope of work just wasn't as deep as it needed to be. The buildings had been really abused, and they were brought back online. They were made livable
Well, at
after they were really bad.
$176,000 a unit, it would, at that figure, it seems to suggest that these have been pretty badly abused.
Well, I can show you most of the apartments, and, we do a good job of making sure that they're livable. They're not luxury, but they're livable, and they're up to code, and Kevin Goodhue is in our units all the time, and he can attest to the fact that we do a pretty good job. But we're promising that for the next 20 years, they're going to hold up. And to do that, we need to start, the kitchens and bathrooms have a useful life. They have a standard for how long that they're really going to last. We're making a commitment that they'll last for 20 years. Not to mention that we'll be able to operate them in a fair way. Again, we don't have project-based rental assistance, so after the contractor's done, we get the keys and we're on our own. We need to make it work like a small business.
All right, so what would you have to, I want to play this out as far as I can because I'm just curious, and I think people would want to know. What do you have to charge on a monthly basis over a 20-year period to recoup $176,000, or for that matter, as a business, to make a profit? What do you have to charge a month?
Well, again, we're restricted, so we keep the rents,
I'm
rents
sorry to
low.
interrupt, but a $176,000 mortgage over a 20-year period, you know, we're talking at least, what, 12 or 1,500 bucks a month as a mortgage payment? Does that sound about right?
No.
Sharon? No? Too much?
Probably half of that's 500,
All right.
maybe.
Right. Jim, home ownership is it's a goal that people strive to attain. And for a lot of people, first-time home buyer, that first home is out of range for them. The home ownership rate in this country has decreased significantly over the past 6, 7, 8 years. More people are staying in rentals. Households are changing. More people are coming into the rental market. And people, in these income groups, the jobs that are being created here now fall into these income ranges. Okay. These government policies, these government programs are set up to provide something for people who make in that income range where they don't get a lot of other benefits. They don't get a lot of other help. They just get what's left in the real estate, in the private rental market. And that's why there are these programs to expand rental opportunities for people in a very targeted income group, and we have to do it right. We have to spend the right amount of money to get it right so that they can last.
This is going to be my final question, but you touched on something that you talked about during the first Shire's issue that came before us several months ago, and that was, helping promote home ownership and perhaps on your end developing a program that would essentially be rent to own. And I wonder if you can speak to, how far that I wouldn't say you made it a promise, but you said that you would, take a serious look at it and help to develop that so that people would become owners instead of renters.
Yeah, Jim, I had hoped by now to announce that we were hiring a home ownership coordinator just to work on assisting people to get into their first home, to buy single-family homes and duplexes that are deteriorated. I'm sorry I don't have a ready-to-go program, but we're close. Before I can launch a program, I have to have the funding assembled, have to have a person to do it, and we're close to that. I'd hoped before I came back before the board, we'd be ready to announce something real. At this point, I need to push my estimate off till spring, but hopefully even sooner than that because we've made some progress.
Okay, thank you.
Did you go out to bid, John, on the project estimates?
Yes.
So how many different companies bid on this project?
Well, we haven't bid the project yet on is it okay if I use comparison to the last development that we did, by way of comparing?
Sure.
We had 7 companies that asked for bid packages. That was on Roaring Branch. So it was a combination of 12 apartments on Benmont Avenue and 14 apartments, new construction on North Branch Street. There were 7 companies that asked for bid packages. There were 5 that attended the walkthrough. There were 4 that returned bids. The nearest to us geographically was Naylor & Breen out of Brandon, Vermont. They were also the low bidder and have a great reputation for doing this kind of project and others. So this time, we wanted to save even more, but we still have federal procurement requirements. So we did a procurement and chose a construction management firm, and it happens to be Naylor & Breen, who was the low bidder. So we've procured for a construction manager, and we've asked them to then handle the bids for each segment of the construction. So they will handle the bids, sealed bids, for electricians, plumbers, carpenters, insulators, site work. And it'll be sealed bids, and we'll get to review them when they're open. So they'll be managing the construction for us, and hopefully it'll be as many local contractors as possible.
So the company that you hired last time to do the new construction over on North Branch Street is running the bidding process for the rehabilitation on this project?
They're managing the bidding process. They're not running it without us seeing it. We will be there when they open the bids.
So they're not going to do any of the construction?
They will bid, for pieces of the construction that they choose to do, they will bid. And we'll be the judge about whether we'll choose their bid over someone else's.
That seems, I mean, just off the cuff, that seems like a little bit of a conflict. Do you?
Well,
see
no,
where-
we're looking to make sure that we bring down the construction costs. We're as concerned as anyone about the high cost of the construction.
How would that drive costs down? I mean, I'm not seeing the
Well,
correlation.
It's actually
Correct,
fairly,
can Johnny answer?
yeah, it's,
How-
actually,
how-
it's fairly common.
How does that
government
drive costs
contracts.
down?
Because I think it gives us more flexibility. In a full-blown bid package, you have to accept the offer on the whole package. And here, it gives us more flexibility because we can bid out different segments. So that was we decided to go that route because it's allowable under federal procurement rules, and it gives us more flexibility to bring down the costs.
I'm not getting the connection between a company that essentially knows in advance what the cost is gonna be and knows what they can come in for a bid. How's that makes a fair bidding process against other organizations that might wanna come in to try and be competitive in that also?
I think
It
the
seems like
process
there's a
we've
little
set
bit more-
up, the process that we've set up is an open, fair process that follows federal guidelines, and any company that wants to bid can bid, and we're going to take the lowest competent bidder for each section of it.
All right, can you get us more documentation on the bidding process from the federal guidelines, how that works, so we can take a look at that a little further?
I can steer you to the federal procurement guidelines, sure.
Okay, you can get that for us?
Yeah.
All right, great, thanks.
I just want to point, it's similar to how we do our bidding. I mean, you use a trusted contractor to work up the industry estimates. I deal with this a lot, and I do it for people. So then you can build the bidding process on real numbers that are made by somebody, but it doesn't pre-qualify you as a bidder.
Okay.
You still have to bid in
That's
the
fine, I just
process.
want to see
Yeah.
it, just because on the face, it seems a little.
Yeah,
off
it does
the-
sound funny when you're not used to it, but it is a
It
very
does.
common process.
We did the same thing with Green Mountain Network.
Two other
Yeah,
questions.
go ahead.
Page one of the pre-application section where you file an application, either as a municipality or a joint consortium. Is it commonplace for only the municipality to be applying for this grant, and why wouldn't Shires be applying for it in consortium with the municipality?
Consortium in that context refers to applications where there's more than one municipality involved. In this case, where there's one municipality involved, the municipality is the applicant and we are the sub-applicant or sub-grantee.
Okay, so does that, what type of liability for this application does the town incur applying for it on your behalf?
Liability,
If you didn't, do you owe this money back at any point in time?
pardon me?
Do you have to return this money at any point in time?
No.
Never. Okay, so this is completely different. This is
Unless we
never-
default or unless we are not, in compliance with program guidelines.
So if you defaulted, or if Shires defaulted or wasn't in compliance with program guidelines, would the municipality ever be on the hook for any portion of these funds?
No, and I think that the town administration, will and should dig deeper into that question to make sure we would never ask the town to take such risk, nor would any developers ask their municipalities to take on such risk on their behalf. So the program has been set up to ensure that that is not the case.
Stuart, can you know if that's completely correct? I mean, do we need any opinion on that from council, or are we just satisfied? that
No, I mean, historically, we've done a number of these grants, not only with Shires, but prior to Shires, it was DRAC and others. And in general, there is in most agreements, there's an indemnification clause where the Shires indemnifies us against any and all claims against the Shires. So even if the Shires does everything according to law and they are sued by somebody, that somebody can sue us, but the Shires in this particular case would indemnify us and protect us from any of those liabilities.
And even if the organization ceased to exist for any reason?
That's an interesting question. I don't suspect that would happen, but from my experience anyway, that does not obligate the town to either complete the project or make up the lost revenue.
I've got a follow-up question to something that you just said, John, with respect to the bids being set out. You said, and it sounded to me like you were backpedaling, with all due respect, that you do your best to make sure that we use as many local contractors as possible. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you as the overseer of this bid, can't you demand that as many contractors come in as close a proximity to Bennington as possible?
Well,
Let's say-
Jim,
let's say
as
it's
I've said,
25 let's say a 25-mile radius, not people from New Hampshire or Albany.
right.
Because you gave us, let me finish, you gave us multiple assurances over times, and I asked you many, many times how often you used local contractors. And this is important to the people of Bennington. It's important for jobs for the people of Bennington. So I'd just like you to clarify that.
Right. Jim, the organization spends $2.5 million a year in the local economy on small jobs, and we always use local contractors where there's no federal bidding procurement requirements involved. And so 100% of that. On projects
And,
like this,
well, define local.
Jim, do you want me to finish?
Yes,
or,
but
you know?
define local for us, okay? In proximity
Well,
to the
maybe-
town of Bennington. How many miles?
Bennington County.
Okay.
On projects that have federal money, that have substantial amounts of federal money, that have federal procurement guidelines, we're not really at liberty to do that in that way. We were fortunate that there's a really good local, Brandon, Vermont is not completely local, but that's a company that has relationships with a lot of Bennington County subcontractors. So I'm pleased about the way that it went, that the last one happened. The largest subcontractors that we had, plumbing, heating, excavation, all went to Bennington County subcontractors. That's how I hope that the next one will go. Hiring a construction manager gives us more flexibility to ensure that our local contractors can compete on these jobs.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I had questions, but they've all been
All been
answered.
answered? Okay.
I've got one more, and
Go ahead,
this is just on the application piece because something got omitted. On page 2, or excuse me, end of page 3, the pre-application, just number 9. The question is, what is the status of community support for the project application? And the answer is omitted from that. Do you have that in front of you, or what your answer was on the pre-application?
It'll be more thoroughly answered in our application, but there's not been a lot of public support because this is the first time that I'm out about it. I can certainly say there's support among the people who live in these apartments, but we haven't been very public about this yet because it's just starting.
Okay, and it just said hearing, it was just completely cut off. It said hearings are scheduled for the, and then there was nothing after that.
I'm sorry there was a mistake on the application.
I wasn't looking for an apology. I'm just curious as to what the answer. If you actually have this, or if it just got omitted from our copy, or if it was just a complete, just error on the application.
I think it was an error or an omission that might have gotten cut off because of the nature of the online system. We plug it in. If it goes too long, it gets cut off.
Okay, thank you. That was the only other question I had.
Tom?
Just a follow-up on a couple of areas. One, what's based upon the experience in these projects, the average local talent, contractors, subs that have been used? Could you, without holding you to it, but is it a 10%, 50%? What's the approximate range?
I think on Roaring Branch it was 75 or 80%, and we're hoping to maintain and expand that.
And just a totally different question relative to the grand list. This is a $44.5 million project. Do you know what the total grand list is for assessment for the properties now?
I'm sorry, but I don't. I can get that, but the properties do all, as you know,
Right.
pay property taxes.
I'd just like to have a baseline.
Yeah.
Stu, is that something you could work on too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent here is to be back at the next meeting for follow-up, and we can certainly have that information.
Yeah.
John, could you speak to the timing of the application and the project, please? As to what your requirements are for the application submission and what you're looking for from us, and then what the project timeline looks like.
Right. If we're able to get a vote at the next meeting, then that would allow us to be within the deadline for the April meeting of the Vermont Community Development Program, which would keep us on track to, as long as our other pieces of funding fell in place, to close in late fall and begin construction before the end of the year. We hopefully we won't have to be pushed back to the July meeting of Vermont Community Development Program, because that would be a more competitive meeting and would endanger our ability to close within the calendar year, which is our goal.
Okay. So with the April grant process, if you get into the April grant cycle and you're successful, you're looking to start construction towards the end of 2015.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, actually, to answer a couple questions, Jim, when looking at the 176 over 20 years, it's about 1050. And then I also want to bring
1050 what?
a month.
A month.
Yeah, just for the mortgage. And then also I want to remind everyone that we are looking at 176 per unit to rehab, but the cost of new, we fortunately already know from the last proposal, which is around $250,000 per unit. So you can see that the difference there. It's almost $80,000 a unit to start new if we were to ask Shires to do that. So those are some figures to keep rolling around. Looking at these projects, we've talked about three: the Benmont, Roaring Branch, Silver Street, and now this one. Each of those had 26 units. Is there any significance to 26 unit projects, or is it just coincidental?
It's coincidental.
Okay. I didn't know if it had to fit in certain guidelines, if you're trying to add different buildings together at one time.
No, it's a good spot. It's a good number in terms of how much we're asking for from the funders. The amount that we can request of the funders, fits in together. We wouldn't want to do it too small because you really don't get the economies of scale. The transaction costs are high. Low-income housing tax credits are expensive to do. You need special attorneys for it. You need a lot of special legal work that adds to the cost. So 24, 25, 26 is a good number that we aim for. So when we assembled in our buildings, we chose the least efficient energy performance-wise, the ones that hadn't had a lot of work done, and came up with a combination and landed at 26.
You said that new Vermont regulations are requiring organizations like yourself to fit certain green initiatives that are, really pushed onto you. Is that for all property that you own or just for new projects?
They're encouraging it every time we do any work on a building. New construction, absolutely not a lot of wiggle room. On rehabs, they say, these are the standards we want you to meet, and we, cost that out and sometimes get a little bit of flexibility on it. But I'm going to add to my list of things to share the energy standards. Mm-hmm. So you can see them for anybody that's construction oriented. You should see what they are.
Now, is that based on the guidelines of your organization, or is that something that's pressed on individual landlords across town as well?
It's it's a mandate by the funders that we use: Vermont Housing Finance Agency, Vermont Housing Conservation Board, Vermont Community Development Program that does this batch of funding. And they've joined together and said, these are the standards that we want our applicants to meet. So to the extent that it's mostly nonprofits these days that are applying, there are for-profits that apply to those sources as well.
So it's not the Vermont state laws, it's the people that are giving you money that are requiring it?
Right.
Okay.
The energy standards are pretty much the same as with private developers now, though, isn't it? I've heard a lot from private builders about what you have to do to get a seal, the inspection approval.
To get the Energy Star seal,
Yeah.
yes. I think this standard is higher than.
It's more than that.
I would need our architect here to break down where this standard is relative to the Energy Star standard. I think it's more stringent.
Also looking at page 3, question 5, it says that there is an acquisition in this process, but you did state, and it seems obvious, that there is no acquisition required.
Intercompany acquisition, technically.
Because of the differences between the names, or?
Kerrigan Lane is owned by a limited partnership because it had historic rehabilitation tax credits some years ago. So that needs to be actually sold to a new partnership. Actually, all the buildings will be owned by a new partnership. So technically, it's an acquisition by the new partnership from Shires in the 2 smaller buildings case.
If you were to change your name in 5 years, would you be able to acquire those properties again and then have a new project instead of the requirement to uphold the standards in perpetuity?
There's the covenants and deed restrictions on these properties are ironclad, and there's no funny business as far as changing names and you can go and get more money or sell them off. There's just really no way to do that.
You're unable to sell them? You have to hold on to them for a certain period of time based on this funding?
Well, we sign a covenant that says we will maintain these units in perpetual affordability to people in that income range. So we're signing up for a long-term commitment, and if my organization were to take a property that had that kind of restriction and try to sell it, we'd have to charge so much for the property because we'd have to pay back all of the soft debt. Anything that's been given to us as a grant is really a 0% long-term mortgage so that they can, ensure that we play by the rules.
So, like you said, perpetuity is a long time. What are your foreseeable outs if you can't uphold or don't want to?
Uphold the terms of the covenant?
Without having to pay back that soft debt, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, my job is to make sure that the decisions were made 15, 16, 17 years ago for the buildings that are out there that are reaching that maturity, that we're going to figure out a way to make them work. I mean, I spent the last month trying to figure out how we were going to refinance Cora B. Whitney, which just hit 15 years. So Diane Binnick was here. She wasn't thinking about year 16. It's my job to think about the 16th year, and there'll be someone else in my seat in 15 years who will be, figuring out how to make sure, well, let's simply say 20 years.
Right.
and they'll figure out how to make sure that we're maintaining perpetual affordability.
And so, as a town, would we be able to put these properties on a map and say we never have to contribute any more tax dollars to these projects because you are obligated to maintain without additional funding from the town or state?
John, that's a good way to phrase it. I actually like that. Yes, you can put these properties on a map and say that the town won't have to worry about them slipping into foreclosure, not paying their taxes, not paying their water bill, not paying the sewer bill. Yes, absolutely. That's the commitment my organization makes every time we buy a property. The town won't have to worry about it becoming a problem. Show me the properties we have in our portfolio that are a problem. You saw Chief Doucette stand here and say, they're not a problem for us. You've heard Kevin Goodhue say they're not a problem for us. So that's the commitment that we make.
And the funds that we're developing here, the VCDP grant, are those funds dedicated to the lower income only, or is that something are there grants like these available for the private citizen that might be a landlord trying to renovate? There's a number of people around town that have at least 26 apartments, I'm sure. Are these monies available to them if they're looking to rehab and renovate and go green? Is it specifically towards the projects that you're pushing?
Yes, but the difference is the restrictions on the rent. If a private developer were to go in and say, I'm willing to sign up for all the same covenants, all the same deed restrictions, all the same rent restrictions, like I won't rent to someone who makes above this amount, then yeah. I mean, look at Silver Street. Look at Bennington House. Look at Homestead Mews, Homestead Green. That's what they are. They're private sector, affordable housing developments that are heavily subsidized on the front end for construction with a deeply, deeply discounted mortgage, and then ongoing rental assistance. I mean, they get ongoing rental assistance contracts. Every month, they get one check from HUD that makes up the differences in the rents there. We don't get that. So there are private affordable housing developers out there that, frankly, in my book, have it a little bit easier than we do.
And then one of the last questions, I guess. Have you seen, I know it's a different area, and we're talking about lower affordable housing. Do you see anything on the higher end, the 30 to 40, the 35 to 45 for the not working class necessarily, but the people out there that are getting decent jobs with decent wages that might be struggling to find decent apartments as well? I think we've heard that a couple of times through a few different studies that there's a hole to fill there. And I'm not an expert in what you're doing, but I thought maybe tertiarily you might have some knowledge on grants that might be available for any of those projects as well.
Right. I think I agree with the Bennington housing study that was recently done. I agree with everything that's said about, we have vulnerable people who are out of range, who are over 60% of median, who really need assistance, who are not jumping into that first-time home buyer market, who are being forced to stay renters for much longer than used to be the average. I think it's a really critical, important segment of the population. Unfortunately, we've got a ways to go before government catches up and makes policies and programs that allows us to serve people up to 70 and 80% of median income. The Community Development Block Grant Program, as a matter of fact, is, the federal restriction is for 80% of median income. The reason why we can't go up to 80 is because of the low-income housing tax credit program, which is because of that's limited to 60%. And again, that income group, many are first-time home buyers, so many are working to, get their credit in shape, get some savings built up so that they can buy that first home. And as I've said earlier, I'm hoping my organization can play a greater role in that in the future, because that's what will stabilize the neighborhoods where these buildings are and, right around the downtown. A duplex with renters on both sides, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But an owner-occupant on one side, is gonna, have that pride of ownership and take care of their property.
And then the last question I had, and I don't know if this is a possibility, but is there any opportunity for you to work with landlords? The reason I'm asking this question is because the common comment when talking about these projects is that at least your organization provides livable, affordable housing, and it kind of uses that momentum to put down private landlords as well. And so I know there's some buildings that might be in need of rehab that have private ownership, but I was wondering if there's opportunity for your organization to work with those landlords instead of having to acquire new property to reinvest in.
Yes, I talk to a lot of owners of rental property out there. There are a lot of individual people who own one or two buildings. I think, especially over the past year, I've been in communication with folks. As far as, helping I'd like to talk to you further about what we can do to help. Is it expertise? Is it financing opportunities? I would love to get together with a group of landlords, come up with a plan, and then go to our local banks and say, we need more help from you. Or go to Vermont Housing Finance Agency and say, we need a new program created because this is what we're facing, these are the conditions. So yes. Is there a perfect program that fits in right now where a landlord can get, grant money without agreeing to ongoing rental restrictions and permanent affordability the way that we do? Doesn't exist right now. But that doesn't mean we can't put our heads together and come up with some creative solutions for what our housing stock needs out there.
Okay. All in all, I think this is a good project. I know I asked a lot of questions, but looking at rehabbing what is existing, I think it'll be interesting to see how the grand list does increase. I know during budget season that was one of our focal points when looking at the budget as a whole and the tax rate. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up. This is the first of 2 warned public hearings on this, so if anyone from the audience has a question for John or the board, you step forward. We have a microphone over here. And I see no one. Okay, so then I will close the public hearing as quickly as I open it. And again, this will be brought up again next week, or 2 weeks, I'm sorry, on the 23rd.
Is it closed or just continued for the?
Well, adjourned until the 23rd, I guess.
Does the public have an opportunity to comment?
Yeah, the public can comment through our normal channels. Our email address is selectboard@benningtonvt.org. You can call the town office if you have a question or comment if you don't have email. So we'll be picking up the public hearing again on the 23rd. Also on the 23rd, I just want to say while I'm on that, is going to be the joint school and town budget presentation. So this will follow that. We will have representatives from our school districts here to explain the upcoming budget for the town meeting day votes, and we will also be presenting that from the town perspective. So thank you, Mr. Broderick.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, John.
We're going to take a quick second. Jim's got to run out of the room.
We in recess.
Yeah, we're in a short intermission here. Thank you. Okay, we're back. Thanks, folks. Next item on the agenda is the White Rocks Trailhead Parking Grant application. This is an opportunity to fix a little problem over at the trailhead on North Branch Street that recently came to light. So Michael Harrington.
Good evening. Just to give you a little bit of background on the project before I have Bill Lyons, who's going to speak on behalf of the Green Mountain Club. The Green Mountain Club approached the town and having done some preliminary scoping work of, I guess, the parking area that currently exists off of North Branch Street and the way you access Bald Mountain and the White Rocks. They've been doing some preliminary work on evaluating the potential of creating a more permanent and better marked parking area, which I think most of us who have grown up in Bennington say that that area could use. They're looking to apply for a grant, and again, in this situation, the municipality needs to be the applicant. They have already put together some preliminary work. They've agreed to work on providing the matching funding that would be required for the grant. They've agreed to draft the application for us to submit, and also the ongoing work. And in talking with the town manager, we've, I guess, examined this opportunity in the past, and we feel that this would be a good project going forward and something that we could manage and maintain pretty effectively. And I think it'd be a nice way to better develop and better mark and utilize this natural resource that so many local and visitors use, and it would also help clarify the trailhead at the same time. So I'm going to pass it off to Bill Lyons, who's going to give you a little bit of background on the project and then answer any questions you have, and I'll be here as well to do the same. So Bill?
Gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. I'm basically here to request the town approval of a grant request to the Vermont Department of Natural Resources for funding to build a parking lot at the trailhead of the Bald Mountain Trail, which most of us in town know as the White Rocks Trail. The Bald Mountain Trail actually runs from Branch Street, up past White Rocks to Bald Mountain, and then back down the mountain on the other side to Harbor Road in Woodford. At Bald Mountain, there is a additional trail called the West Ridge Trail, which then runs up to the Long Trail at Glastonbury Mountain. As such, it's considered a side trail for the Long Trail, and the Green Mountain Club is the group that maintains and manages what we call the Long Trail system, throughout the state of Vermont. So we're very interested in making sure there's access to our side trails as well as to the long trail. The Branch Street trailhead is rather unique because it's the only trailhead in the state of Vermont that connects to the long trail in an urban area. So it's of special interest to the Green Mountain Club. Also, it's a trail that the town has decided to protect. Several years ago when the 279 highway was being put in, the town stood up for that trail and said, we need an underpass, a pedestrian underpass under 279 to maintain that trail, and that happened, for which I think we're all very happy.
And Tom, just to clarify here, for folks who aren't familiar with the hiking trails, the long trail here is also the Appalachian Trail, correct?
Some portion of it
But
is,
the one
only as
through
far
here is-
as Rutland,
Right.
roughly.
So,
And-
and has a unique identity of bringing people to Vermont on foot.
Correct.
So, from as far as Georgia. So if you're not familiar with the hiking trails, it's a very significant passageway through the area. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. The trail, as you know, is very popular with Bennington residents. It's almost, I think, a rite of passage for the high school students or junior high school students to make that trek to White Rocks. Unfortunately, the parking that's been there, I don't know, maybe 30 years, 40 years, I don't know how long it's been there. It's been there longer than I've been here, is the small little right-of-way alongside of Branch Street, which will accommodate 2 to 3 cars, depending on how carefully people park. If you aren't one of those fortunate people, particularly on a weekend, then you have to try to park off the side of the road on Branch Street, and it's almost impossible to get your vehicle totally off the roadway. So it's a safety hazard not having a little more parking or accessibility to that. The GMC has a right-of-way through the private property from Branch Street up through the property, up actually to the Green Mountain National Forest on the other side of 279. The landowner is supportive of maintaining that right-of-way, but he is concerned that his only access to his property is right at where that parking occurs, and if it's all parked up, he can't get to his property. So he approached the Green Mountain Club with reference to that concern, as well as some concern about where the trail actually runs through his property, not asking us to eliminate the easement, but simply asking us if some relocations were possible. To that end, he actually contracted to have a study done on what would be involved to build a small parking area on land that he currently owns at the base of that property. We have an engineering cost estimate for that project of about $31,000. It's a gravel parking lot, accommodates up to 6 cars. At this time, what we're looking for is to, we've identified, let's put this, the Green Mountain Club has identified a grant from the Land and Conservation Fund that's only available to municipalities. GMC is proposing to prepare the grant application on behalf of the town and to provide the necessary matching funds that are necessary to complete the project. However, the grant deadline is very tight. It is February 16th, 1 week from tonight. So at this time, what we're asking is that the town agree to submit the grant application as prepared by the Green Mountain Club. If the grant is received, the town would need to administer that grant. It probably would need to oversee the construction and maintain the parking lot. So, so if we were to if you were to accept portion of the land, it's about 0.16 acres. However, what we're pursuing is actually an easement, would be jointly held by the Green Mountain Club and the town of Bennington. And that would become, rather than a full ownership. It's not clear right now whether the grant would accept either the easement or the full ownership, but we do have commitments from the landowner that we can make it work one way or the other.
I think it's important to point out that there are a couple different outstanding items through the grant application that will need to be resolved over time, so this won't be the one and only time that we come before the board looking for input and support. Simply tonight, we're just looking for the okay that you're comfortable with staff submitting the application. There will be a time when the town needs, if the grant is awarded, to accept the award, and there will be subsequent conversations about the select board drafting and signing a resolution. So there will be continued times when the club and staff come before the board to work through the project. So again, tonight, simply just looking for the okay to submit the application on behalf of the Green Mountain Club.
Michael, could you speak to the matching funds and to your conversations with our highway supervisor about this, please?
Sure. The matching funds, from my understanding, are a 50-50 match. So if the project is approximately $31,000, the match would be, $15,500, and the Green Mountain Club, either through fundraising or funds that they already have, has agreed that they would provide the matching amount required for that. It is acceptable that in-kind donations can be considered matching amounts. So at that point, if someone were willing to donate the gravel to be used or the excavation, and you may be wondering the significant amount of money for simply a gravel parking area, but there's a significant amount of leveling and excavation that has to happen up there if you've been up there recently. So again, if there are different pieces that are willing to be donated, there is a certain level of those donations or in-kind contributions that can be considered part of the match. And then in terms of maintenance, I've talked with our highway superintendent, and he really feels that our ability to maintain that would be minimal. This is a project that the highway department has looked to in the past and just hasn't been able to recreate something that was as cost effective as this. So the maintenance is really minimal, and they don't really feel that it would impact either in terms of time or budget resources on their end.
Question for you, Mike. When you say minimal maintenance, I mean, are you going to have, is this going to be accessible in the wintertime, and then it will therefore necessitate it being plowed?
I think that's something we can certainly decide.
For
again,
6 cars?
If you look at the plans, we're not talking a significant parking area. So it would be probably, if there's some leveling or regrading that has to happen, that would be the extent of the work that we would do during the season. If we decided that there was access for snowshoeing in the winter, which I know people do access the trail for snowshoeing, then again, it would be the plowing.
I just want to make sure that I got the number of car spaces that you said would be included. That would be 6 cars?
That's correct.
Yeah.
6. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that would be significant, actually. People accessing that trail in the winter are causing more of an obstruction, than they do in the summer trying to get on the trail. And you're right, it is a popular snowshoe trail, and to get up to Bald Mountain, was up there last weekend. So, any other questions on the board on this?
It looks like it's well engineered. I'm sure going to be a challenge, but speaking from use personally, I've always wondered if my car was still going to be at the corner as you go around and you come back down off the hill. This is really great for the Green Mountain Club to, as usual, step up. And I appreciate, and we appreciate your leadership in this. And I'm certainly in favor, but I think we have to waive the 2-week.
Well, that's it. We generally wait until the following meeting to have time to look into these things. In the fact, the size of the project, what they're proposing and the fact that there are other obstacles or other opportunities to chime in if something doesn't look right or needs to be adjusted. I'd offer to waive that if the board feels comfortable with it, and if someone wants to make a motion tonight.
I would make the motion to accept the application process to be overseen by the town management.
I'd
I'll
second that.
Okay. In a second, okay. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, I certainly think it's a worthwhile project and, something that I'm certainly in favor of, and we are going to get a second chance to discuss it, so I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, the long trail system is one of the great assets that constantly gets named here, so if we can make that more accessible, I think it speaks to a lot of things we've been talking about.
No brainer.
All right, thank you, John. All right, I'll take a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Thanks for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good work. Okay. The next item, Michael, don't go far. We have the microloan program redesignation. We discussed this at the last meeting. We are going to take a vote this week on whether we want to designate that and work on a plan for that. Michael, do you have any further information on what we discussed last week?
Nope, just for clarity and for those people watching at home, at the last meeting, we discussed the idea of creating a development fund using community development block grant monies that had been turned into a microloan program, and which is currently not being used. And we do have other loan opportunities. So simply tonight, recognizing that there's more work that needs to be done on the process, the procedure, the procurement process, and the way we access the funds, just looking for the board approval to eliminate the microloan program and use that as an economic development fund. The economic development partners will meet this month. It is on the agenda for them to discuss going about creating a program description and working with the board to develop the procedure for accessing those funds, which I think will probably take a few more meetings for us to get to something that is we think we're all on the same page with and it's appropriate. So again, looking just to designate the funds tonight, and then we'll work on the program description to access them.
Okay. Any questions from Mike on that?
No, I have no problem moving the funds, but I would suggest that they aren't used unless unanimously approved by the board. So they're not moved to an accessible area until we
So
develop
until the
that plan.
program's developed?
That would be the expectation, that we're simply designating the fund tonight, and there would be no attempt to access them unless there was some opportunity, like John had mentioned, in which case that would be, it would come back to the board and you guys can decide how you want to do that. But really the intent is to simply eliminate the microloan program, create the economic development fund, and we wouldn't look to access those funds until there was a program description in place to do so.
I think sorry, Tom, you want to go?
Go ahead.
I think, I wasn't here last meeting, but I was able to catch up and follow up and watch some of it from you guys from a couple weeks back. I think we're definitely on the right track with eliminating that microloan program. It hasn't been successful. It really looks to be a pot of money that's just kind of sitting there collecting dust and not growing in any way for us to be useful. I'm just not sure if dropping the fund altogether and creating another fund tonight without having the logistics in place of what that's going to look like. I'm not sure what I'm voting on. Although I agree with the premise of what you're trying to do.
Well, there hasn't been a motion yet, so.
Right.
um,
And that's just my only point.
I mean, I think what we discussed last week was, voting on approving the redesignation process or something like that, so they know how somebody worded it. But yeah, we're not.
I guess that I'm just thinking the details.
Yep.
A little bit further down the road are going to be important.
There's got to be some level of application process and review for the money to be used. We don't have that, but we should be able to say it's a good idea to put that in place.
Or to present it to us.
Yeah.
So
I think also too, what we have right now, and let me just use an extreme example, but let's say over the course of the handful of meetings, we're talking a few months out to have a fully vetted program description and policy in place. If we felt there was an opportunity at this time that would come up during that period of time that we wanted to take advantage of, right now, because we've already designated those funds, the board couldn't even access those funds if it wanted to, because they're already under certain policies on how they're distributed. So really what we're looking to do is eliminate the program, free up the availability of those funds, and then determine the process. I think likewise, as Justin mentioned, if the board is more comfortable saying we want the full plan in place before we redesignate those funds, that's certainly an acceptable option as well. It's really more about how accessible and quickly you might want to access those funds, or how much ability you have to do that. Because right now they're restricted.
I think it's twofold. One, we need to direct staff as to what we want to do.
Sure.
And two is to decide if we want to dissolve the original, the current standing of the loan and to redirect it in some way. And you can do one or two of those tonight if we want.
I think if we eliminate the microloan program, but then technically kind of freeze the funds so they can't go anywhere else in the meantime until we get the full plan.
Yeah, you could
like
dissolve the microloan fund and redirect the funds to a fund controlled by the select board.
Could we maybe just freeze the earlier program pending the receipt, review, and determination by the board as to what it wants to do relative to a full economic development fund program? Can we do that? Just free, you know?
Yeah, I think you can certainly, and Stuart, feel free to share your thoughts, but I think if the board simply wanted to say we're dissolving this fund on the, the expectation that there will be a future fund that will be developed.
I guess I'd rather than dissolve it without knowing where it's
Yep.
going, just freeze it pending the further deliberation or presentation of a economic development fund program. Then we don't do anything with it until we got the, as Michael would say.
I think it's pretty clear that everybody's on the same page that the microloan fund hasn't been successful in reallocation of that money in some form or another is probably a good idea. I just think it's pertinent to see what that program looks like before we actually make a formal switch.
So are we comfortable just directing Michael to pursue a policy and plan with the economic development partners help and present a recommendation for the future of their microloan fund?
Yeah, that's
Well,
perfect.
well, right now, I mean, we know that there's a 100% chance that we're not going to use the money towards the microloan program, correct?
Right.
And we're saying there's a 99% chance that within the amount of time that it takes to develop this new program, we won't be using the funds either. But are we willing to have the money on hold for that 1% chance? So right now, if we put everything on hold, the money will not and cannot be used until, and let's face it, guys, things take a long time to develop here in this world. So, I mean, we could be talking 6 months to a year before this
Well,
is.
you know, I think that's part of the discussion. We should put some timelines on this effort, that we should have a report back to us from management and the economic development partners within a month. And it just seems like that should be enough time to take that working draft of the program policy, get it homogenized and pasteurized and back to us so that we can do the same thing again.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you, I've received some feedback from some of you in terms of your thoughts on the current description as it sits, but if you have other feedback, it'll just help guide the process towards something that's most acceptable to the board.
Can you go over just one more time the original source of those funds?
So my understanding, because it predates me, is that there was a community, so as we were talking with Shires earlier, the Community Development Block Grant Program has two components to it. The low to moderate income assisted living housing component and a job creation component, which can go to businesses for job created projects. So these funds were given in a community development block grant that went to Abacus Automation for the creation and expansion of their location up on the industrial park. And so those monies were paid back over a period of time with the understanding that the monies that the town was able to keep through that project, they had to go towards other job-creating initiatives. So there's a kind of a wide scope on that, but essentially it has to go towards job creation.
In the potential proposal you guys are looking to put before us, that's going to fit that scope?
Yes.
Stu, is there an area where we can allocate these funds where the select board has sole discretion as to where they go?
You can do that. I mean,
Let's not call it anything, but let's call it the select board fund. The reason I don't want to just freeze the account is because we're just handcuffing ourselves if something were to come up. I don't know if that's worthy of trying to make a change, but if there's an area where the entire board has to make a decision, and again, I'm not suggesting that this is going to come up, more than likely it won't, but if we just freeze it, then we definitely don't have an opportunity.
and that was our point. The attempt was to, let's eliminate the microloan program. We know we're not using it, and free up these assets to be able to be used in a program to be developed, but also, should something come along that made sense for the board, some economic development scenario that's not on our radar at the present time, we'd want to be able to move quickly. And so rather than have to deal with the elimination of the microloan program at that time, we would be able to access the funds under purview of the board should something come to us prior to having a program in place.
I mean, is there a formal procedure for freezing and unfreezing these funds, or, I mean, are we just kind of calling it a freezing and unfreezing
I mean, the
of
only
funds as
formal
we
policy
sit
we
here
really
tonight?
have is our two-meeting
Right.
discussion, you know.
I mean, if we froze the funds today, we could unfreeze them in 2 weeks.
Right, we are the body that
Right.
makes that decision either way. So
My request would be that let's eliminate the microloan program and freeze the funds.
Right. Yeah, because I don't understand why we can.
I'll second.
we have 6 seconds. Give Sharon the second on that one. All right.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this?
And just to be clear, if we do this, we still have to have a proposal of how we spend
Yes.
this money before it's spent.
It would have to be approved by the select
Yes.
board.
And as chair, I'd hope that would be a unanimous decision until something is put in place.
Well, you'd have to put that in a motion.
Just a comment.
All right. All in favor?
Yeah.
All right, that is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. Okay, next item is the formation of the Town Manager's Performance Review Committee. We talked about this last time we had adopted the process and the review. So I'd like to put together a committee of volunteers who would start this process for the first time. And
I'll jump on board.
John, I'd like to get 3
I'm
people.
happy to be on that.
Certainly think it should be the chair, whoever that may be at the time.
Well, what I'm thinking is that process may go beyond town meeting, in which case I won't be
But
here.
we'll still have another chair.
So just
I'm just
the
saying
chair.
the chair, not.
My reason for bringing this up now, because you saw my body language at the last meeting, when this was going to be delayed, there's about 11 weeks until a new chair is in the office.
Right.
I think that's
That's
about
enough time.
20% of our year, and I think not using the time between now and then to develop the metrics along with Stu is a waste of our time.
Is that enough time to finish the process?
It's certainly a great enough time to get a good start.
How many are you thinking about for 3?
They would have to be 3 tops.
Yes.
All due respect to you, Greg, and everyone that's held the position as a chair, but the vote is the same as anyone on the board.
Right.
And so the significance of having the chair be involved unless they want to be, I just see it as a figurehead position, and that's not fair to any of the other board members that have come and have passed. I think it's an equal position.
I agree, and my worry is that if it's not done in 11 weeks, there'd be a lack of continuity in the process. I have no problem.
I don't think we can assume that there should be or with fear that there should be lack of continuity. A board has voted on something and a board's got to move ahead. You can't just stop time because there's an election.
No, I mean, I agree with going ahead with the
Yeah.
process.
Good.
I'm just saying, as having me on the committee, maybe.
I'll certainly stay on the committee. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been the three of us
Yeah.
so far, so.
Yeah.
Did you want to be on the
Why?
committee, Tom?
No,
Or,
I don't,
look-
I was going to be willing to fill out the third slot, but, I expect this to be a vibrant, dynamic, and committee that meets and comes back with some real hard work.
How could it be anything else?
That's right, we've been meeting
Okay,
forever.
so we'll use the same committee that put the process together. What I like about moving forward is, like Michael was saying, this board has created this process, so I think we should take the first shot at it, to work out the kinks and whatnot and move it forward. So I appreciate that. So it'll be Michael, Sharon, and John then.
Good luck.
All right,
Can
thank you.
Still be the secretary and set up the meetings?
He will. All right,
the
we have
wine.
some liquor license
That's
applications.
okay too.
Yes, you have some that are renewals, and there's a signature page for those, and you have one new first-class, second-class license, and there is a separate signature page which I've clipped at the back of that.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is, we talked about this last time. It was a trip to St. Albans to meet with some economic development partners up there about the rejuvenation of their downtown. Michael Keene is going to take us through this. He went on that trip along with several other people. And Michael Harrington has a presentation we can run simultaneously. So.
It was Michael and Mike's excellent adventure. I'll just do it
Yeah,
from
just go-
here instead of...
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very simply, let me give you about a minute or two of background. I first ran into the St. Albans City Management Team when I joined the Vermont Economic Progress Council. St. Albans came in and made some very good presentations with businesses in St. Albans and received several VEGI grants. VEGIs are Vermont Economic Growth Incentive grants for private businesses. In probably my first 6 months on VEPSI, St. Albans also came in through its city development team and its mayor, Liz Gamache, and applied for a tax increment financing project through the state to do downtown redevelopment and improvement of brownfields areas in the city of St. Albans. Essentially, in 5 words, a tax increment financing basically allows a town to do a good amount of development with developers and with private individuals, and the incremental taxes that come from new development over the course of about 20 years are used to pay off the debt. In any case, having built a relationship with those folks, I thought it'd be a good idea for some of us to visit with the city development team. And this group, the only person who is not in the room tonight who visited is Joanne Ehrenhaus, but Mike Harrington's here, Tom Jacobs, John Shanahan was here before, Mike McDonough, Dan Monks, and myself. We met with Don Cloud, who is the city manager, and Marty Manahan, who is the former mayor, but also the director of operations and business development for the city. We listened, we learned what they did and how they did it. And if you've been to St. Albans lately, and I know you have been there a lot, and I've been there on a lot of days when you can't even find a parking space in town, so many things have changed for the better over the past year and a half or two that I think it's a good example of both urban renewal and renovation. We also looked at a number of the improvements around the city because they took us on a tour. Mike, you want to go to the next slide? Let's give you the situation, the background. They really started out at the bottom. They believed that St. Albans at the time was unsustainable by any measure. High downtown vacancy rates, 60% vacancies in downtown ground floors. As they told us, the grand list was moving backwards, crime was way up. Icons like the St. Albans House were really falling apart. The St. Albans House was a bordello for a while. They did have
Not recently.
Pardon?
Not recently.
Not Not recently, but it was for a while.
Civil War time.
Yeah. But also within the past 20 years, apparently. Yeah.
I haven't been there for.
Don't worry, okay. They spoke very compellingly about the fact that there was a tradition of take no risk city management, which they tried to break. And they were handicapped by the fact that there was a continual turnover of city managers, something like 4 within 6 years. Obviously, that doesn't allow people to do anything. The most compelling thing for us to hear was that this model of the city council providing a vision wasn't working. So they had to try some other things. They had to try other approaches. Michael, let's pop it on. So they began to look for and elect city council candidates who were willing to take risks, who had a can-do attitude. At the same time, they were putting a very entrepreneurial, solid staff team in place. The citizenry was very eager for positive change. Everybody had a can-do rather than a no-do attitude. One of the things that we heard a number of times from the team during the course of the day we were there is that they had a firm belief that public investment by the town, and if maybe this sort of positions our for all of you, our suggested approach to changing the microloan fund, maybe this explains it a bit. Public investment triggers private investment. One of the things that we all said that same day was if a town is not willing to invest in itself, why should a developer or a private investor do that? They did establish about a $500,000 fund that they called Catalyst Capital. And that was partially thanks to a Walmart settlement. And that Catalyst Capital was to be used for strategic land acquisitions. The belief being that if they have control of a piece of property, they have a better chance of attracting and doing something very positive with a developer. Let's go back one little bit again. So basically, the city has used acquisitions to take a lead in revitalization. One of the things that we did hear a lot about was that the Walmart, the advent of Walmart there could have been a death spiral for them, so they had to take some real action. Go ahead, Mike. Well, they realized they couldn't wait and they had to champion initiatives, so they did a good rehab of the St. Albans House, this historic hotel, which now has offices, it's got elevators in it, they have retained the historical aspect of the building, but it's now a very productive building for offices and businesses. They've done a Main Street makeover, and the Main Street makeover I think is very interesting because they've done cutouts, curb cuts along the street, and they've allowed several restaurants to basically reconfigure themselves so that instead of being restaurants where people are sitting inside all the time, at the right times of the year, obviously not now, but in the good weather, the restaurants are able to lift up their front doors or their front windows and put seating out on the curbside. So really making a very attractive atmosphere and environment for people in town. They landed Ace Hardware as a downtown key anchor store. As I mentioned before, we did approve a tax increment financing district for them, and they mentioned several times that it was worth the time and the money to partner with a top consultant for development and with a top advisor for historic and for new market tax credits. I think that really made a difference. What were the critical success factors for them? And what can any town learn from that? Well, they were willing to take risks. They believed that the city itself had to lead revitalization, and that mantra came back again. Public investment attracts private investment. Everybody was on board. The mayor, the city council, which had been, in a sense, formed to this, the population of the town was on board. They married professional expertise to local relationships. Those are the consultants we talked about. They developed relationships with grade A developers, and they had, most of all, that feeling of municipal skin in the game and municipal quarterbacking of the initiatives. Their idea was that the town's got to be, in their words, the first dollars in. Again, I'm thinking of potential uses for what used to be the what will soon have been the microloan fund. Media support has been critical, and here I just want to tell you one specific anecdote. Emerson Lind and the St. Albans Messenger are key supporters. The night we came back from St. Albans, I wrote a note from all of us, an email to Emerson Lind at the St. Albans Messenger, telling him and telling the town how impressed we were at what the city development team had done, how impressed we were at what they saw. I did that at about 9 o'clock that night. It was a Friday night. 7:30 the next morning, 7:30 when I checked my email, there was a response from Emerson Lind saying, "Thank you guys for visiting. We're putting your letter in the St. Albans Messenger this weekend. We really appreciate your interest. We have been following this in the St. Albans Messenger all along, and we have been really supportive of it." That's what you really need in your local papers. They also were very careful to enlist county senators and local House representatives, and they even had the governor in a number of times looking at what's going on. They did what we think are many of the right things. And they did them in ways that we think are best practice and ways that we in any other town can learn from. And that's always been my sense of things. You look at what people are doing very well. You look at best practice and you steal from the best. Our next steps, we're going to bring part of the St. Albans city development team down here. I think the date will be March 16th, and I will be inviting everybody on the select board to come and join us for this meeting with the Bennington Economic Development Partners and the city development team. We expect they'd be here from about lunchtime till 4 in the afternoon, so we want to give you about a month's notice so that you can set aside some time for that. We also, what we learned from them is that we need to make sure we're all rowing to the same lighthouse, that we're all going in the same direction and not going off in different ways. And part of that is for us to ID the first project that we need to tackle, because what was clearly an advantage for them was that they hit on a project that they tackled first. They really made it a success. They pulled out all the stops, and we've got to do the same thing. As they say in the Catholic Church, the Mass is over.
It was great job there, Michael.
Thanks,
Really.
Michael. I appreciate you putting
Now
that
you know the context
trip together, too.
and
That
how
was-
this in fact can play within this fund that we think we should create that would come out of what is in the microloan fund now. And there needs to be a process in place.
Well, there's definitely some issues that they've had that we run into where there doesn't seem to be enough private sector initiative to see something develop. And once you get it off the ground, the potential of that can change. So, those are the
thing
types
that's
of things
amazing
that
up
you
there-
can do with a fund.
Greg, is that,
Yeah.
you hear Michael talk, you look at that, and you go, how many decades did that take? That's a 5-year, give or take.
Boom.
Yeah.
And that basically is not a project that took 10 miles or 5 miles. That's within a 2-mile radius that they
Right.
basically reinvented the town or the city.
That's great.
And there's no reason why we can't, again, rowing together, get the same lighthouse.
Excellent. All right, we have a town manager's report.
Yes, just a few brief things. I talked a little bit about the road salt early on.
Right.
We had 2 tax sale properties that we offered once again. I had hoped to receive a number of offers or bids on those properties. Unfortunately, I received only 1 offer or 1 bid on each of the properties. I'm still reviewing those and talking with the the folks who made the offers to understand what their long-term plans are for the property. So I'm not prepared at this time to recommend a sale of either of the properties, and hope to be willing to do that by February 23rd.
What were the offers?
I'm not going to tell you that at the present time. I think they were lower than we had hoped. And I am in negotiation with at least one of the bidders.
Okay.
The Joint Municipal Survey Committee, which is something you authorized me to become a part of, it's a 13-town committee. We've been meeting to try to come up with an alliance to handle solid waste problems and initiatives going into the future. All 13 towns have signed on. We continue to meet, and we are absolutely making progress, which is really a very good sign for Bennington County. Bennington County is the only county without an alliance or a solid waste district. So we have been going it alone on an individual basis for all these years. We are finally now working together, and we hope to have an ordinance that each town must adopt having to deal with licensing the haulers in your community, and that is now a state mandate. We have to have that in place by June 18th. It's not a big deal. It's not going to be too burdensome for the haulers, but we need to know what services they're offering and how they're offering them. And then there will be an agreement that will form the alliance that each town must also give consent to. And then the solid waste implementation plan would be the biggest part of this whole process, which will place us collectively in compliance with state law going forward. So I think it's really good news. I think it's really fantastic that we're all holding together. In the past, efforts have always stumbled upon the large town, small town dynamic, and we seem to have been able to cross that bridge this time around.
So we still have full membership in that group?
Pardon me?
Nobody's dropped out of that group?
Nobody's
today?
dropped out at this time.
Great.
And the feedback has been really positive from all of the committee members. The last thing is the FEMA final appeal, and I'll ask Dan to take the microphone just to give you some additional background. We did finally hear from FEMA long after their 90-day review period had lapsed. Unfortunately, the word was, we need more information. And I'll let Dan explain it.
Sure. As Stu mentioned, they have a 90-day time limit for them to respond. They took 6 extra weeks to get back to us to simply ask for more information. So that's where we are. A little background. We started off requesting about $6 million in reimbursement from the FEMA folks. We're down to a disputed $1.3 million, so
Just
we're
to clarify,
progress.
this is for the post-Hurricane Irene work?
Yes. I
Thanks.
sometimes forget people don't know
Yeah,
that.
just in case
Been working on
somebody's
it for
tuning
3
in
years.
for the first time.
So, yeah, as I mentioned, 3 years ago after Irene, we put in a request for $6 million in reimbursement requests for funds. We're down to $1.3 million in dispute, so we're making progress, but we're not going to be happy till we get that last amount. And as Stuart mentioned, there is a extensive request for additional information, which we feel is unwarranted, but we are going to, because we have no other choice. We will comply. Our river scientist, Dr. Roy Schiff, will be responding to the very technical request. We still don't really understand why Bennington is being scrutinized so much, but that's going to be up to our congressional delegation to work that out with FEMA, and they have committed to work with us in our continued efforts. So we've made progress. We're still waiting on that last piece.
Are other areas across the state feeling the same type of impact, or have they been covered, so to speak?
Well, most places have just basically given up because of the intense effort that it takes to fight this through the system. I mean, getting down to 1.3 million, most people would say, oh, we did great. But, you know, we feel like every single cent that we spent is appropriate for reimbursement from FEMA, and we're not going to give up until we've exhausted all avenues.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
All righty. That it, Stu?
That is it.
Okay, John, you have any other business tonight?
I do not.
Justin?
I don't.
John, James?
No, sir.
Sharon?
Just with all the snow we've had, just to remind commercial plow people not to plow the snow into the back across the road because it leaves big humps for the other travelers. So please just be aware of that and keep the snow on the snowbanks.
Michael?
I've said enough tonight.
Thomas?
I said enough too, but kudos to the highway department.
Yeah.
They're really, I wake up to them every morning.
A lot of us do.
I do too, but it's about 4 o'clock in the
That's what I
morning.
mean.
It's like,
But they're doing a great job. It's thankless, and they're using the right products at the right time.
Well, let's change that. Thank you for the hard work. And if you have sidewalks, folks, it's very challenging for the town to get to the sidewalks. We have 2 units that we have out. Those folks are also running plows. So, don't be afraid. If you have the ability and you have a shovel or a broom and you can help out a little bit. I've been on a few sidewalks where, you get an inch or 2 inches of snow after a big dump. The machine's already been through. If you can clean that up, it's going to keep it from icing over. It's going to help people's access getting through town. So,
and if you have a fire hydrant, unbury it.
yeah, open that up. That may work in your favor. So we need to keep those fire hydrants accessible, and don't bury them, please, when you're shoveling. A couple other quick things. We had talked about Thursday the 12th. There is a forum. The Town and Oral Health Coalition are hosting to discuss and answer questions on their recommendation to increase the level of fluoride in the municipal water system. That is Article 15 on the town meeting ballot as an advisory question. So there will be a panel to answer questions, and at 6:30 to 8:30 on Thursday night right here, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on the 12th of February. That will be carried live by CAT TV and WBTN. And I'm told, will be rebroadcast several times as possible between now and town meeting day. There is also what we're calling Explosion Bennington 2015. It's going to be April 15th. That is going to be an event at Mount Anthony Country Club featuring pretty much all of the cultural organizations in the area, our arts economy, rolling out their schedules for the coming year all at once. We're inviting press and exhibitors and public and interested organizations. I am going to ask you, and I'll feed you some more information, to consider the town being a sponsor for that event. We are looking for several sponsors. We have a budget, and we need to do some first-class promotional and design work to get this off the ground. So if the 3 levels of sponsorship have been identified as an event sponsor, it's $1,000. A gold sponsor is $500, and a silver sponsor is $250. I will tell you that my company has signed up to be an event sponsor, and we're doing this as an opportunity to get what has been identified as the number 15 most vibrant small community in the United States. Some solid publicity, the way that the Bennington Museum has been noted lately, and many other things in town, as Mr. Grimshaw pointed out. So I will get you some information on that, and I will be making a request on that. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to give you details, but this is pretty much new news. So anybody else? That's it?
Contract form, is that before next meeting?
That's on the 19th, I think.
The 19th of February is it's a forum on the negative effects of fluoride.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be before our next meeting as well.
That's right. Will be the 23rd. Will be our next meeting.
Is that the same time?
I believe that's 6 p.m. And
Here
at the firehouse. Yes. Okay. Then I need a motion to go into executive session
So
to discuss
moved.
contracts and a loan application.
I'll second it.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? We are unanimous. We are in executive session. Thank you, everybody.